Hi everyone, welcome to Edinburgh night tour bus. I hope on this bus we're hoping to see a night Christmas light, Christmas decoration on the way, all the way through. But it start off quite nice. I think at the end, kind of getting darker, I have to stop the tour. And the tour bus is all about Edinburgh history, like Edinburgh Castle history, who lived there, and the old Sakuna Edinburgh is here, also talking about Queen Mary Scott, who stayed at Edinburgh Castle, and King James give birth to King James VI, or become King James I of England. Also all about history of Edinburgh. Here the tour guide going to be here soon. Hope you enjoy the tour. Thank you very much for listening.
Rather chilly welcome aboard, folks, to this Edinburgh bus tour. Good afternoon. Welcome. My name's Gabriel. I'll be your guide for this second to last tour of the City of Contrast, Edinburgh Old and New Town. I'm sure you met our driver downstairs, Dario. We'll be making we'll be going through this route that should take about an hour and 10 minutes to complete. Now we're starting in a different place this afternoon, as we have been for this whole weekend, in front of the wonderful dome over there, as you can see on the right-hand side. And I remind you, if you're doing your tour tomorrow, given that your tickets are valid for 24 hours, which you could do tomorrow morning, for example, well, that'll be starting at stop number 1, as you'll see it on your map. So Waverley Bridge, which is closed off on the weekend, and that's due to the Christmas market festivities over in Princess Street Gardens, which you'll see in a moment's time as we get to Princess Street, in fact. We're starting, of course, at the eastern end of George Street. If you're feeling a bit lost, we're around the corner from stop number 13. If you can find the Hard Rock Cafe and near St Andrew Square, that's exactly where we are right now. Well, stop number 10, well, you'll see some wonderful views of Edinburgh Castle, and you can get off there, of course, later on in the week if you do, to go and see that castle, which closes usually in the evening at 5 p.m, generally the last entry at 4 p.m. Now we begin this tour with an incredible view, as you can see in the distance, onto one of the largest monuments in the world dedicated to the life of an author. That author is none other than Sir Walter Scott, and that Gothic spire you can see there is about 200 feet, and if you want to be picky, 200 feet and 6 inches tall, and one of the largest, as I say, in the world. You can climb to the top of it if you wish. There's about 287 steps between you at the bottom and the top if you're feeling up to it. It takes, well, it doesn't take too long. You can do guided tours throughout the week between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And a monument which opened in 1846, which is dedicated to Scott's historic genre of novels. These are tartan-tinged myths which in the early 19th century were responsible for rekindling a great love affair and interest in Scottish folklore and history. Rob Roy, the Waverley novels, Heart Midlothian, to name a few. It is, of course, slightly engulfed by much of these Christmas market celebrations on the right-hand side. They opened about a week ago, I should say. We've been there longer than an hour, and they have a good 150 stalls or so of hot food, wine, mulled wine, fondue, and lots of rather scary-looking fairground attractions. They'll be there until the 5th of January if you haven't tried them already. Rather perilous-looking Starfly up there, as you can see behind us on the right-hand side. It launches about 70 feet in the air. That's a swing-like contraption back there. Now they of course sit on Princess Street. This is one of the main boulevards, part of the New Town, to our left-hand side. Originally it's meant to be a place of residence, the Princess Street here, but nowadays, as you can see, the thoroughfare of Edinburgh and one of the main places of commerce. It's home as well to 2 very grand hotels. I think you might be looking at one of them already, up in the distance there on the right-hand side, with that iconic clock face. It's the Balmoral Hotel. It opened in 1902, and despite the R&F on the side of it, which looks a bit like Roger Federer perhaps lives there, or at least owns it, it's not quite owned by Roger Federer, but by the Roccoforte Group, an Italian hotel chain that named it the Balmoral Hotel after it was originally called the North British Hotel here on your right-hand side. Named the Balmoral Hotel, however, that's getting for majestic dwelling. And, well, it's a rather majestic place to stay, I must say. Some of the suites within it, for example, costing maybe £4,000 to £5,000 a night. That's, for example, in the August season, when Edinburgh this year saw about 3 million people visit the city during the international and fringe festivals. Now, originally, that hotel there on your right-hand side served the Waverley railway station underneath it, connecting Edinburgh here up north to the Highlands and via the East Coast Railway line down south into England. And you'll notice it has a clock face up there on the right-hand side. Rather important that is for anyone wanting to catch a train in the building, because you'll notice it's 3 minutes fast, and for a reason. Anyone thinking they'd be late for their train, they get to the platform and realise, I've missed my train, whatsoever. It'll be there waiting for them. A nice feature, which is fast for the whole year, except for Hogmanay, when it's quite important to have the right time. Princes Street back there, packed to the rafters with people singing Old Lang Syne, bringing in the new year. Now we'll see at Balmoral Hotel later on in the tour, but before we do, we're now making our way to one of the 7 hills upon which Edinburgh has been constructed. This in the distance is known as Calton Hill. It's about 100 metres to its summit, and indeed you can climb to the top by taking these stairs on your left-hand side, maybe 10 minutes walk or so. Stunning views from up there onto, firstly, the Firth of Forth, to the north of the city, but also closer to home across the road here on the right-hand side, onto St Andrew's House, a contrasting Art Deco building which opened in 1939. Now, St Andrew's House is nowadays known as being the home of the Scottish government. People such as the First Minister of Scotland, for example, have offices within that building there. What a place to work, as you can see in the distance on the right-hand side, given the views it has onto that extinct volcanic plateau of Arthur's Seat and Salisbury Crags. Now, I should just say, we're coming up to our next stop, stop number 2, so if anyone's wanting to leave us here, do let me know by giving me a wave. Yeah, a few people upstairs, Dario, for stop number 2, thank you. And you'll notice here on the left-hand side at stop number 2, one of the many examples of Greek revival buildings you'll find here in Edinburgh. This was formerly the Royal High School on your left-hand side between 1829 and 1968. Can you believe for the past 51 years it's been empty? Many ideas of what it could soon be. My favourite, the new home to the Edinburgh School of Music. What a place to study that would be, given those wonderful views we have in the distance on the right-hand side. Thank you very much, take care. Onto Arthur's Seat and Salisbury Crags. Take care, folks. See you later. I often think Thomas Hamilton, the architect there on the left-hand side of the Royal High School, was rather cruel in his design. He didn't put any windows, as you can see, in the exterior facade, apparently to prevent the boys studying there from being distracted from those views you have in the distance. A cruel idea, but I like the idea of the new home of the Edinburgh School of Music myself. Now you might be able to see if you squint hard enough, a few people who climbed to the top of Arthur's Seat there. It's about 251 metres to the summit, more or less. And, well, it'll take about an hour or so to climb to the top. Not too bad a hike, you don't have to be too into your hiking to do it. Although my only piece of advice, wear some solid footwear. No flip-flops, maybe, or even one afternoon I saw someone in a pair of heels. Probably not the best idea. Don't want to injure yourself for Christmas, that's for sure. But stunning views, it's well worth it if you have the time. Onto the Old Town especially, that extinct volcanic plateau that it forms, and also down south onto the Pentland Hills, that's for sure. You'll see an assortment of lights over there on the right-hand side at the base of Arthur's Seat, attached to a part of a stone building with an assortment of turrets too, and a yellow flag if you can not see that perhaps. That building there at the base of Arthur's Seat is known quite simply as the Palace of Holyrood House, and is in fact the official place of residence for the British monarch when in Scotland. The Queen, well, she still comes up here in a tradition that dates back to the reign of Queen Victoria. And when she's here, generally for the first week of July, she hosts a number of events. One of these, this year, saw about 9,000 people in attendance, known as the Queen's Garden Party. Many of these invited people from different charities and institutions from around Scotland, got a chance to meet her and explore the grounds and palace that was really extended during the reign of both King James IV and up to the end of the reign of King James V from about 1488 to the mid-1530s. But, well, it's open today. It would have been closed when she was in residence. It is open, and although closed right now, it closes usually at 4:30 p.m. It generally opens in the morning around 9:30, with the last entry being at 3:15 p.m. Wonderful place to be. I mentioned King James V. He is in fact buried at the palace on the outside of an abbey known as the Holyrood Abbey, which is far older, dating back to 1128 in its foundation. And the men who used to live there, monks or canons, Augustinian canons as they're often described, they were the men responsible when living there from the 12th century up until the 14th century for founding that school we saw earlier on, the Royal High School, which as an institution is one of the oldest schools in Scotland, founded in the mid-12th century. Well, King James V wasn't quite born in Edinburgh. He was born about 50 miles west in the palace of Linlithgow. His daughter was too, Mary, Queen of Scots of all people, in 1542, and she used to live at the palace too, did Mary Stuart, after arriving here in 1561 at the age of 18. Can you believe, when she was here for about 6 years, it's said that she used to bathe in a rather cold-looking stone cottage right on the periphery of the palace. See if you can spot Queen Mary's bathhouse up ahead on the left-hand side of the road. I can't quite imagine it myself, but some suggest she used to bathe in white wine of all things, maybe something she picked up after spending much of her childhood and adolescence in France. I can imagine it to be quite a sticky affair myself, and probably not true, I'm afraid to say. Most probably that stone cottage there on the left-hand side used for the storage of tools. Now, this was once the King's Privy Garden on the left-hand side. In fact, they're renovating at the moment to show you how it would have once been in the mid-17th century. Now keep your eyes peeled now. As we go across this junction, looking to your left-hand side, past these gates, you should see in the distance the dark stone buildings or ruins of the Holyrood Abbey. Part of the palace, you can also find the Queen's Gallery, as you can see here on your left-hand side. That opened in 2002 to celebrate the Queen's Golden Jubilee, and at the moment they have an exhibition, one of the largest of its kind ever in Scotland, dedicated to Leonardo da Vinci, 80 or so of his drawings, to celebrate what would be his 500th anniversary or birthday this year. Now notice these lampposts on either side of the road as we turn this corner, and what you notice on top of them on either side of the road are small crowns if you look hard enough. What those crowns denote is that as we turn the corner, we're coming into what was formerly a game reserve set up by King James V. These lampposts are just up here on the right-hand side. Quite easy to miss, I must say. But what nowadays, hence the crowns, is known as a royal park. And the Holyrood Park is one of the largest as well in Europe, about 640 acres more or less in size, equivalent to Central Park over in New York in its size. The only difference being we have an extinct volcano in Arthur's Seat in the middle of this one. Head left, you should be able to see a trail jutting up into the hillside, taking you all the way to the top. About 45 minutes or so, if you feel up to it. Now, the name Holyrood has links to a story that once took place here all the way back in 1127, involving the king at that time, King David I, who went hunting in the woods at the base of Arthur's Seat here, despite being warned not to by many of his advisors. He delved deeper and deeper into the forests until it's said that he was attacked by a great white stag. This stag threw him off his horse and he thought he was about to be killed, when all of a sudden a great white burning cross is said to appear before him, frightening that stag away. He was spared, and the next night St. Andrew is said to have appeared before him and said, "David, you must build an abbey to commemorate that miraculous event." And indeed he did. The Holyrood Abbey, which you saw earlier on. The word rood, in fact, an old Scots word for cross, calling that white cross that appeared before him. We're now leaving Holyrood Park now, coming into an area also known as Holyrood, but one thing you'll notice about Holyrood is how modern many of the buildings here look. For example, here on your left-hand side, this is nowadays the headquarters for Rockstar North, quite a famous gaming company up here in Scotland, formerly founded in Dundee, up northeast. They've made games such as Grand Theft Auto, of course, Red Dead Redemption, amongst others. And it sits across the road too from our next stop here on your right-hand side, stop number 4, home to a rather exquisite geological museum. And we have a few people upstairs, Dario, for stop number 4. Thank you. This museum, as you can see on the right-hand side, opened in 2000 and is known as Our Dynamic Earth. Very interactive dynamic, and then it will tell you the geological story of Scotland, starting in the Big Bang. You're travelling what they describe as a time portal, going through time. You'll going through oceans, rainforests, deserts. You'll be able to touch a glacier if you wish to and feel what it's like to be in a volcanic eruption. So we have a few people upstairs, Dario, and if you're just downstairs, just ring the bell if you wish to. Thank you. And the reason why many of the buildings here are so modern looking, real contrast compared to the rest of the Old Town, is that up until 1996, this was a place of breweries, up to 30 breweries at a time, once housed here, including where Our Dynamic Earth is back there. Stop number 4, by the way. Thank you. Just coming downstairs, Dario. Cheers. On the site of another of these breweries you can see opposite Dynamic Earth, however, it's a very different building. Various shades of grey. You'll notice a very unusual design, I suppose, or quite different compared to the rest of the buildings here. Firstly, its construction and design was the result of a referendum that took place 22 years ago, back in 1997. And this referendum was to ask the population here in Scotland whether they were in favour of a devolved separate parliament from Westminster down in London, England. And they were. And so this building's design, firstly, was thought up due to a competition that was held a year later, back in 1998, and won by a Catalan architect, not quite a Scottish architect, known as Enric Morales. Morales was hugely influenced by the Scottish landscape, its folklore and people, and lots of symbolism in both the exterior and interior architectural features of this parliament that was really constructed between 1999 and 2004. In fact, this year is the 20th anniversary of the first sitting of that devolved parliament back in 1999. Well, in a moment's time, we'll be going past the front entrance, and I'll point out to you some of these quirky features of Morales' designs of that devolved parliament. But before we do, we're making our way, of course, back into Holyrood Park, hence the crowns up ahead on the lampposts on either side of the road. And you'll notice too, surrounding Our Dynamic Earth, the former site of the brewery, what looked like old castle walls on the left-hand side there. Not quite, as I say, once a brewery, but it's said those walls were constructed by Prince Albert, royal consort, and once husband to Queen Victoria, when she used to come up to the palace each year. She used to complain of the ghastly sight and smell of the brewery there. Gazing from her bedroom window for the palace, they said to him, do something about it. Indeed, he did. In fact, he built these faux castle walls. But it said each morning he went so far as to employ local brewery workers to dress up as soldiers and parade along the battlements just so she had a nicer view, I suppose. Whether he found a way to disguise the smell or not, I'm not quite sure. If she was still around today, she'd be even happier with much of the landscaping features on your left-hand side, shrubbery and wildflowers of the Scottish Parliament, obscuring that view to even more of an extent. And they were all native to the Highlands of Scotland. Amongst them too, you'll find 3 ponds on the left-hand side, again symbolic of the 3 lochans, 3 small lakes you can find within Holyrood Park. It's a very open parliament. Indeed, Morales wanted people to be able to simply look in and see what their representatives are up to, 129 members of the Scottish Parliament. Hence, the large number of windows you can see on the outer facade here. Around some of the windows, you might be able to spot dark grey shapes surrounding them too. They're meant to symbolise drawn-back curtains, those dark grey shapes, but often people can't help but think of, I don't know, hair dryers or something like that, maybe a ray gun when they look at them. Quite confusing, I must say, and for a number of years, his designs did quite well bewilder people. He died prematurely first, he did, Morales, in 2000. People couldn't quite work out what he intended. This very different Scottish Parliament, which is very open, that theme of transparency transcended in the inside. And we do some very informative guided tours throughout the week, Monday to Saturday, exploring the debating chambers, committee rooms, and also inner galleries of that Parliament. And while the Parliament there on your left-hand side, together with the Holyrood Abbey at the bottom, sit at the base of the Royal Mile, of course, this being one of the most important roads in Edinburgh. It's about 1.1 miles to be precise, not sometimes known as a Scottish mile, longer than an English mile, and it simply denotes really the distance from the Abbey at the bottom to the castle at the top. It's split or spliced into 5 different sections, its name changing as the further you climb. We're coming now to the second of these, known as the Canongate, which is home to our next stop number 5. For anyone perhaps wanting to go to the Museum of Edinburgh, up ahead on your left-hand side, that yellow building, which is open from 10 AM to 5 PM, free of charge too, or the People's Story Museum with the clock face up ahead on the right-hand side, similarly open until 5 PM free of charge, dedicated to really telling the story of the working classes of Edinburgh from the 18th century up until the present day. Do we have anyone upstairs for stop number 5? No one upstairs, Dario, thank you. You have the official place of worship here too on your right-hand side. To the Queen when in Edinburgh, the Canongate Kirk dating back to 1688 in its construction, the final resting place to some of the most important residents here in Edinburgh, including Adam Smith, the great economist and author of The Wealth of Nations, during here the Scottish Enlightenment at the end of the 18th century. We'll hear more about him for sure later on in this talk. Now the Canongate where we are now simply means the lane that the canons or these monks took to make their way up into the Old Town ahead of us, and it was in fact a separate royal borough all the way up until 1856. Anyone going into the Old Town of Edinburgh had to go through a wall, in fact, which stood just up ahead where you can see some traffic lights if you can, and we'll be going past them in a moment's time. It was known as the Flood Wall, constructed in 1513 to simply protect the residents of Edinburgh from what they thought was an impending English attack after the Battle of Flodden down in Northumberland to the north of England, which was rather unsuccessful. For the Scottish Army, at least 2,000 troops more or less dying, and the monarch, the Scottish King himself, King James IV, who was the last British monarch to die in battle, falling also. Now, it took them a while to build the Flood Wall, which no longer exists today in its entirety. Good 50 years or less, even by 1566, 53 years after this battle, it still hadn't been finished. But what we do know at least is that there were 6 entryways going in through it into the Old Town. One of these stood up ahead in this junction. It was known as the Netherbow Port, and it was open until about 1764. The weird thing about this Netherbow Port is that if you were going into the Old Town, you had to pay a toll to get in, which meant that for much of the population of the Old Town who were working class stock, perhaps didn't have the means to leave and pay the toll you had to pay to get back in. It said that they spent their whole lives within the Old Town, never once leaving. That Flood Wall for them was symbolic of the end of the world. Venturing any further, they would have been going into unknown ground. Hence one of the reasons why you can see up ahead here on the left-hand side, a pub on the side of the Flood Wall known as the World's End. While making our way to what would have been the Old Town of Edinburgh, the High Street here, we're once again coming to another stop number 6. So do let me know upstairs or downstairs if you want to leave us here. I think we're fine where we are. No one upstairs, Dario. Thank you. And you have the Museum of Childhood here on the left-hand side. It'll be open throughout the week. Opened in 1955, one of the first museums of its kind. Quick trip down memory lane, free to go to, as I say. The last time I was there, I saw something known as a teacher torturer, an unusual contraption that small children used to use to make an annoying rattling noise to wind up their teachers, small enough, however, to hide away in their pockets. One of these quirky, unusual features, as I say, of this museum, which really is dedicated to retelling the way in which the notion of childhood has changed throughout the ages. Now, the museum too forms part of one of these one of the prominent features of the new town, these large, high-rising tenement buildings. We get an idea of this stuff, particularly as you look down Blackfriars Street here to the left-hand side in a moment, and then after it, Midry Street, how high some of these buildings reach. Sometimes it said 10 to 14 stories in height. 10 for a reason, of course. The Royal Mile is in fact built upon what's known as a crag-and-tail landform, caused 335 million years ago when a glacier carved its way through the volcanic plateau here, and as it did so, it deposited material bit by bit, creating a slope. The upshot of this, as you can see, particularly looking south downhill on the left-hand side, is that on either side of the Royal Mile, you have sharply descending cliff faces. A nightmare this was, particularly for town planners, as the city's population began to grow, so they couldn't extend the city outwards. They had no choice but to build it up, particularly because a flood of war also stopped them from doing this. Real mishmash of classes would have all lived under the same roof. Ministers, bailiffs, and knights in not the best conditions either. In those old Gardy-Lou days, people, before the introduction of sanitation systems, simply kept a bucket in the corner of the room, allowed it to be filled up throughout the day, and that contents, be quite a brown slurry, would have been emptied onto the pavement each evening from their windows as they shouted Gardy-Lou to a rather unfortunate passerby, I must say, and probably giving Edinburgh perhaps that old title of Old Reekie due to that stench that would have filled the streets here of the old town. Maybe it wasn't the old coal-fire smoke that was often described surrounding Edinburgh from the north of these sort of drovers over in the Kingdom of Fife. Maybe it was just an awful pong. And with Edinburgh not being particularly flat, as you may have noticed, it wouldn't have stagnated but flowed down into these many valleys and crevices on either side of the Royal Mile. Now the city's geography also played a key part in merchants coming into the city. It also prevented them from getting in here. So in 1788, it was decided that a bridge was to be constructed, the South Bridge, to traverse the Cowgate Valley here, coming up. You'll be able to look into that valley in a moment, looking down left. We'll be turning onto the bridge, in fact, in a moment's time, but you'll notice something rather unusual about it. It doesn't really look like a bridge at all. 18 of its 19 arches are obscured on either side by buildings, tenement buildings, which will hide 18 of them. The only visible arch nowadays is still in use by the second oldest road in Edinburgh. I often think people living on top of each other back then, even nowadays, in these very cramped conditions in these tenement buildings, that you'd have your fair share of bickering and quarrels between neighbours. In fact, down at the Cowgate, heading down left on Old Fish Market Close, there was an unusual complaint made to the local council by someone who lived here, a baker on the ground floor level who's known as Adam Kerr. He said to the local council back in November of 1705 that his neighbour living above him, above the bakery, a Dutchman by the name of Abraham Sewer, was keeping an elephant, of all things, within his first floor flat. No word of a lie. Quite unusual, I know, but whether it was fully grown or not, I'm not quite sure, but the council allowed for this elephant to be kept after Kerr said that its dung was seeping through the ceilings, not quite good for business, spoiling his buns and bread and things like that. But kept it was, and put on display. That was the condition by Sewer to the residents of Edinburgh until it was eventually died in 1706, taken up to Dundee. So never again will I at least still complain of neighbours making noise. Thankfully never having shared a tenement building with an elephant. So, an unusual story, but beforehand it said it was taken on or paraded along around Europe for a number of decades until arriving here around 1705. As we turn the corner here left, you'll see the Tron Kirk here on the right hand side, This had to be decreased in size. Although being built in 1628, it's no longer a place of worship. Its size was decreased really to make way for the construction of that South Bridge, which I described to you. See if you can spot it. In fact, we're on it at the moment. And in a moment's time, you'll be able to see a gap in between these buildings on either side of the road, and you'll be looking 50 feet down onto the Cowgate, that road that passes through the only visible archway of this bridge, which is over 1,000 feet in length, constructed in 1788, down on your right and left-hand side. Really showing off this idea of Edinburgh being a city of contrast, a city of levels. There are 19 arches in total, as I say, designed by Robert Kay simply to be a place of commerce at bridge level, at least grain, spices, tobacco sold here and stored within the many vaults of these arches below our feet. The Cowgate back there, 50 feet below us there, it's the second oldest road in Edinburgh. Would have originally been a passageway taken by farmers from the south of the city to sell their livestock at the grass market, from the early 1300s at least. On the other side of the Cowgate Valley, we're now coming to a very different exhibit that you can see, the National Museum of Scotland at stop number 7. Do let me know if you want to leave us here, stop number 7. And the museum itself will be open until 5 p.m. each evening, opening at 10 a.m. in the morning and free of charge. You can see it just up ahead here on your left-hand side. Wonderful place to visit, 7 floors worth of exhibits exploring the natural history of Scotland, archaeological exhibits and excavations that have taken place here, including a number of important scientific discoveries, or in more modern times at least, here in Scotland, right from the prehistoric days up until the present day. And a wonderful open-air rooftop garden terrace, which I really recommend, up on the 7th floor, offering stunning views onto Edinburgh Castle, that's for sure. No one upstairs, Dario, for stop number 7. Thanks very much, folks. Turn this corner. There often is a few people around him wanting to rub his nose for good luck, apparently. Nothing to do with that romantic tale of a policeman's dog, of course, Bobby was, belonging to a local policeman whose name was John or Jock Gray. There he is, can you spot him? Bobby there on your right-hand side. Coming to one of the main quarters of the University of Edinburgh, here on the south side of the city. And the 4th oldest it is in Scotland, dating back to 1582 in its foundation. Well, nowadays to about 40,000 students during the academic year. Beautiful views, as you can say, there's Christmas decorations attached to a spire building, TV Row over there, which was one of the first student unions in the world. It opened in 1889, still open today. Wonderful library bar I recommend going to if you wish to. And students studying there will graduate eventually in the McEwen Hall on the left-hand side, the graduation hall, which was designed by Robert Rowan Anderson in the early 1880s. And it's attached to the medical school as well on your left-hand side, which is still used here by first and second year students. It was also been the place of study for Charles Darwin. He studied 2 years to become a doctor here. And also the novelist, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who's Sherlock Holmes, most famous character of Sherlock Holmes, that fictional detective, is said to have been based on his former professor here, Dr. Joseph Bell, who, in these parts at least in Edinburgh, was known for helping out on police investigations, as well as being a surgeon, due to his great talent for spotting things that most people missed, skill for deduction and investigation. And you'll need that for sure. He's investigative, keen eye for detail and things like that, those skills that Bell had. So spot Bobby once again, he'll be coming up on your right hand side. Acquired was Bobby in 1856 by Gray, his policeman, but he died 2 years later, leaving Bobby all alone in 1858. Bobby here, he didn't run away, there he is on your right hand side. In fact, he stayed by his master's side within Greyfriars Kirkyard, beyond these walls on the left hand side. Now for the next few days or weeks, or for the next 14 years until he died in 1872. Immortalised by that statue erected in 1873, and he became quite popular. Looked after by locals, his dog licence even paid for in 1871 by the local Lord Provost. We're not wishing to burst anyone's bubble, but this rather romantic story, if you think about it, he wouldn't be about 16 years old. And it's even quite a ripe old age even nowadays for a dog. Some suggest that maybe he died far earlier. But the local guest house and tavern owners took advantage of this rather romantic tale that spread across the lands as people flocked to see this loyal Skye Terrier, to train another Skye Terrier to sit by Jock Gray's gravestone back there, just to keep that flow of money coming into Greyfriars. I quite like that idea myself. Probably not true, I must say, but quite a plausible idea, I must say. And a tale, of course, about a loyal Skye Terrier and his master, who would often come, in fact, patrol down in the grass market here. The grass market, I should say, is home to our next stop, stop number 8, where those drovers would have eventually arrived to sell their livestock. You'll see there on your right-hand side. Does anyone want to get off here, by the way? Stop number 8.
What is it?
Stop number 8, the grass market.
Yeah.
A few people upstairs, Dario, thank you. Notice that road up there on the right-hand side, Victoria Street, formerly the West Bow, one of J.K. Rowling's inspirations for the Harry Potter novels. Diagon Alley, inspired by Victoria Street up there on the right-hand side. Stop number 8, have a nice evening. See you later. No worries. Turn this corner. There often is a few people around him wanting to rub his nose for good luck, apparently. Nothing to do with that romantic tale of a policeman's dog, of course, Bobby was, belonging to a local policeman whose name was John or Jock Gray. There he is, can you spot him? I'll be there on your right hand side. But before we do, we're now coming to one of the main quarters of the University of Edinburgh here in the south side of the city. And the fourth oldest it is in Scotland, dating back to 1582 and its foundation. Well, nowadays to about 40,000 students during the academic year. Beautiful views, as you can say, there's Christmas decorations attached to a spire building, TV Row over there, which was one of the first student unions in the world. It opened in 1889, still open today. Wonderful library bar I recommend going to if you wish to. And students studying there will graduate eventually in the McEwen Hall on the left-hand side, the graduation hall, which was designed by Robert Rowan Anderson in the early 1880s. And it's attached to the medical school as well on your left-hand side, which is still used here by first and second year students. There's also been the place of study for Charles Darwin. He studied 2 years to become a doctor here. And also the novelist, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who's Sherlock Holmes, most famous character of Sherlock Holmes, that fictional detective, is said to have been based on his former professor here, Dr. Joseph Bell, who, in these parts at least in Edinburgh, was known for helping out on police investigations, as well as being a surgeon, due to his great talent for spotting things that most people missed, skill for deduction and investigation. And you'll need that for sure. He's investigative, keen eye for detail and things like that, those skills that Bell had. So spot Bobby once again, he'll be coming up on your right hand side. Acquired was Bobby in 1856 by Gray, his policeman, but he died 2 years later, leaving Bobby all alone in 1858. Bobby here, he didn't run away, there he is on your right hand side. In fact, he stayed by his master's side within Greyfriars Kirkyard, beyond these walls on the left hand side. Now for the next few days or weeks, or for the next 14 years until he died in 1872. Immortalised by that statue erected in 1873, and he became quite popular. Looked after by locals, his dog licence even paid for in 1871 by the local Lord Provost. We're not wishing to burst anyone's bubble, but this rather romantic story, if you think about it, he wouldn't be about 16 years old. And it's even quite a ripe old age even nowadays for a dog. Some suggest that maybe he died far earlier. But the local guest house and tavern owners took advantage of this rather romantic tale that spread across the lands as people flocked to see this loyal Skye Terrier, to train another Skye Terrier to sit by Jock Gray's gravestone back there, just to keep that flow of money coming into Greyfriars. I quite like that idea myself. Probably not true, I must say, but quite a plausible idea, I must say. And a tale, of course, about a loyal Skye Terrier and his master, who would often come, in fact, patrol down in the grass market here. The grass market, I should say, is home to our next stop, stop number 8, where those drovers would have eventually arrived to sell their livestock. You'll see there on your right hand side. Does anyone want to get off here, by the way? Stop number 8.
What is it?
Stop number 8, the grass market.
Yeah.
A few people upstairs, Dario, thank you. Notice that road up there on the right hand side, Victoria Street, formerly the West Bow, one of J.K. Rowling's inspirations for the Harry Potter novels. Diagon Alley, inspired by Victoria Street up there on the right hand side. Stop number 8, have a nice evening, see you later. No worries. Now within many of these pubs, many of these pubs at the grass market were the old haunts of 2 Irishmen who came to live here in 1828 in the Westport, just beyond us here. Their names were William Burke and William Hare, and they'd really come to Edinburgh to work on the construction of the Union Canal as navvies, or navigators. But we're here at a time in Edinburgh when resurrection men, during this body snatching period, roam the kirkyards, looking, I'm afraid to say, to dig people up and sell them on to local medical men. For a profit, of course. Great advancements in the research of human anatomy were being made in those days, and there can be a lot of money made from it. That's, as I say, lucrative business. So Burke and Hare caught wind of this, especially when they noticed, their old guest house, Tanner's Close, which was once situated up ahead on your right-hand side, nowadays Argyle House, this dark grey building, nowadays an IT tech startup hub. They noticed that an old man had passed away, so they saw an opportunity, took him up to a Dr. Robert Knox, and he paid them cash in hand, enough £7 and 10 shillings, equivalent to maybe 4 or 5 months' work. So no surprise they got a taste for it, and on a number of occasions they went to Greyfriars Kirkyard to continue this awful body-snatching craze. Until they were caught. And they were caught by night watchmen on patrol there, and they had to give the whole thing up. The jig was up until, deliberating amongst themselves in 1828, after this foiled body-snatching attempt, they came up with a solution, and that solution was, I'm afraid to say, murder. They killed between 16 and 30 people in the Westport area here during a 10-month period, can you believe? Not that long at all, and took those bodies up to Dr. Robert Knox, who would turn a blind eye, no questions asked. Until they were caught, and you're not going to bump into them anytime soon, and if you're getting off on the next stop around the corner, stop number 9, Johnston Terrace on the right-hand side, do let me know as well. And you're not going to bump into them because they were caught, of course, in Halloween of 1828. And when questioned by police, William Hare did something ingenious. He turned King's evidence, meaning that all of the blame for the crimes was immediately put on the shoulders of his counterpart, William Burke, meaning that Hare got off scot-free. Fled down south, found innocent in London, and nothing more was heard from him. Burke, of course, not seeing as rosy an ending as his pal William Hare, got away and he was, of course, executed and hanged. And I often think that anyone at these executions, for example, down at the Grass Market, they would have had a lovely view if they didn't have too strong a stomach to up onto Castle Rock here at Edinburgh Castle, as you can see here. Now, Castle Rock is one of these 7 hills upon which Edinburgh has been constructed, often described as a volcanic plug. Impregnable and tough as well. That rock is igneous, known as dolerite, very dark, and difficult to climb as well. In fact, this is the most besieged battlement in the British Isles, around 26 times throughout its history. And the castle itself, there on the left-hand side, was constructed between the reign of Malcolm III, King Malcolm III, from about 1058 to 1093. Only 900 years, and has nearly 1,000 years in fact, but there has been some form of settlement up there on Castle Rock, maybe 2,500 to 3,000 years, going all the way back to the Bronze Age. It's open, I remind you, until 5 p.m. Generally, the last entry is at 4 p.m, so I'm not quite sure of the time. We may have missed that by now, but it's open throughout the week, of course. Wonderful things to see up there: the National War Museum of Scotland, the royal apartments in which Mary Queen of Scots gave birth to his son, King James VI, a Stone of Destiny along with the crown jewels, and also the 1 o'clock gun, of course, fired still to this very day, after being opened in 1861, simply to act as an audible signal for sailors over in the port of Leith so they could set their watches and go on their merry way on the stroke of 1 p.m. And you'll hear that tomorrow, Monday to Saturday, much to the terror, I must say, of a few people who aren't quite expecting it in Princes Street and now over in Princes Street Gardens. Now the castle can be got to or accessed by going up the hill here on your left-hand side. About 5 minutes walk from the Lawn Market, which incidentally is our next stop up ahead, stop number 10. So if you're wanting to leave us here, or maybe head up to the Castle Esplanade, lovely views from up there, just in front of the castle gates, do let me know. You can get off here at stop number 10. No one upstairs, it seems, Dario, but I think we're stopping here anyway. I'll remind you all as well that the last stop of each bus stop along this route is shown on the timetable section.
I'd like to say thank you very much for watching. I'm in Edinburgh today. This has been the Edinburgh market. I went on the tour bus, but it's a little bit too dark, so not able to see a lot. Thank you very much everyone. ขอบคุณมากนะคะที่ติดตามที่เข้ามาชมสวัสดีค่ะขอบคุณทุกท่านค่ะสวัสดีค่ะ